two different things on that. The first one is that if you can provide stability and security to people, stability and security, that's what matters. Like, if I can go to work and feed my family and not get killed, and if or no, there was a completely different thing that I saw on. Oh, I don't remember. This was some interview on NPR, I think, where it was essentially like, if people know the rules and you clearly define like these are the rules of this society, you follow these rules and you get that stability and security, as long as you say Heil to the Overlord. And if you can do all, if you say Heil to the Overlord and don't, and and you go to work and you're a good citizen, then you'll be fine and you'll take that. And even though like if you really think about it, you've given up like a lot of your freedom or expression or whatever. And then the other part of that is not just the you don't have to treat all your citizens well. It's there are different segments of the population that
Yes.
if they, as long as they are not on the bottom, they are okay with that. If somebody is worse off than them, then that's okay. It's a really dark thing, but yeah.
I mean, that's how it works, right? Like that's what you see throughout history with dictatorships, right? Is like they stratify class in order to either produce a self kind of identifying enemy, right? So you think about the ways in which dictatorships prey on minorities because they are minorities. It's a useful mechanism for a dictatorship in order to suppress a populace's concern, is going, hey, these are the bad guys and they should be treated poorly. And that's exactly what you're saying, Ryan, which is like, and therefore I have security because if we just get rid of them all, or if we lock them all up, or if we, whatever it is we do, the problem becomes, well, what happens when that isn't enough? Well, we need to come for someone else. And that's why like fundamentally dictatorships are not sustainable. And it's kind of why Star Wars is really interesting with the Sith as a concept as well, is like, eventually they'll come for you, right? Like, it doesn't matter how good you have it, it will run out eventually. And eventually, either in order to justify it, they'll have to go find another enemy, and so they'll start a war, or they'll come for you next at some point unless you do something. And what's kind of interesting is if you think about the lack of, the Sith is that rule of two, which is only a relatively recent rule as far as the Sith is concerned in Star Wars history. But the rule of two is like sort of, it's like a self-defeating mechanism. And in some ways, you've got to wonder to what extent Lucas thinks evil is self-defeating with that concept, right? Because it's like, eventually your Padawan, your learner, your number two, if you're a Sith, is going to come for you. They're going to, at some point, find their own apprentice, develop power, and try and kill you in order to become the one in charge. And it's that idea of like evil is kind of self-defeating, which is a very kind of 80s, 90s thing that was big in popular fiction in America in particular. I think after Reaganism and all that stuff, I think it was an interesting natural response. By the time you get to the second film being made, and Lucas is pretty clear in the text, pretty clear feelings about Afghanistan and Bush's response, and the ways in which he leveraged what happened. I think there's something interesting about the way that, like, the Empire, particularly when we see it in things like Andor, where you're kind of in the seminars where the CIA equivalent in Star Wars are making these decisions and trying to sustain the Empire. They're making similar choices to what you would make if you're in a democracy, but the cost is always human life, safety, or comfort, right? And it's like, instead of sacrificing other things like a clear path forward, or like the requirement to have discourse, you're sacrificing people as the resource with which you achieve your means. And it's, I don't know, like, I just think it's partly why it's one of the most interesting periods in Star Wars, is characters remember that it wasn't working before, but what they have now is significantly worse. And so the question is, like, what do you do? Like, how do you fix this? And of course, the sequel trilogy has no answer. They just do the Republic again. And the books are a lot more interested, granted. I've read a few of the, particularly the Leia book, Bloodline.
I was just about to say that, yeah, Bloodline. delves into that, and I
Yeah.
thought was like the most interesting thing of the sequel era, like the political part of that.
Well, and what's that book has this masterstroke where they're having the same issue where they're having like political gridlock because again they've just done democracy the exact same way as the republic, instead of replicating a model that we know works in real life, right? Which is sort of how this thing happens. And that inevitably gives way to a fascist dictator again. I mean, look at America. That's literally seems to be the trajectory again. But what's kind of interesting is they have a character in that who is a young dude. He's kind of Leia's offsider, and he's on the other side. So he's effective. If Leia is if Leia is functionally like a democratic socialist, he is a conservative, and he's young enough that he wasn't around during the war, but he like collects Empire artifacts because he thinks that they're like interesting, and he thinks that like the Empire had a bunch of good ideas, and if only you could put those good ideas to work in a different system, like it'd be fine. Like the Empire was bad and the Emperor was evil. But what if you did all that stuff and you had a not evil person running it? Like surely that would work. And what the story gets at that is fascinating is Leia's kind of like, dude, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And he gets kind of coerced into almost like cosplaying as someone who agrees with the Empire, and by the end of that story, it genuinely challenges Leia to have a conversation with this dude. And it's the most interesting the sequel era is, I think. It's probably in that book, which is a fucking shame because those are really salient questions to the time we're in now. Imagine if Lucas had made those sequels, they would be about the rise of fascism in America and Trump and the result of like kind of resting on our laurels, you know, after Obama for 8 years. Like that would be the stuff he'd be exploring in the same way that that's what he was interested in when he made the prequels. And I guess when I say there's an absence of ideology in the sequels, that's what I mean. That was what I wanted to get to tease that.
I took some notes from back when I read Bloodline. I don't even know how old this is. It's got to be several years now. But thankfully, Google Docs saves everything. So there's two quotes. Is if the galaxy truly could have been united under a wise authoritarian leader, such an empire might have stood for 1,000 years to rival the old republic itself. His name's Ransom Casterfo.
Yes,
and he said,
Ransom, it's such a good name.
And then my favorite quote, it was one of those things where like I saw it, I'm like, I've got to write this down because this quote is just awesome, and it's just it's awesome and it's very real, like that you would have this sort of attitude from people in the time following a system like that, or somebody that wasn't there or was only on the periphery or whatever. But like that quote is, the only problem was that we had the wrong emperor.
Yes.
And it's so good, like that part. Where the hell are we?
Okay, yeah. Yes. Okay, so look, our princess is in another castle. Okay, we finish the level, and the game pulls a lazy like, yeah, Toffel in here, and Sia's like, that's fine. We'll just go back to Zepho and see what's up with the tomb. Very weird choice to make. Yeah, it's a really artificial way to make you go back to Zepho to communicate to you mentally that you'll be coming back to Kashyyyk at some point to meet Toffel. It's just needed a second pass of how they structured that, but whatever.
All right, you want part two?
Yeah, let's do part two.